Amen? And that's why when people say, I don't go to church, I am the church, you're missing it. Yes, you're a part of the church, but you're not the church all by yourself. So you can't say, I don't go to church, I am the church. You're not an assembly. You can't make the word mean anything other than what it means. It means gathering together of God's people. Now that does transcend time and space. It includes every believer. And we gather in local assemblies, but it's always a cluster of people, whether it's millions or in billions, or it's three. But it's never one. And that's where people miss it. And I've done it too. I've preached those things, and because it sounds cool, right? It sounds good. Everyone's like, yeah, that's right, I am the church. I don't go to church, I am the church. Well, you go to an assembly. So, it's not a building, but it is a gathering. And that's the difference. And I think a lot of it is a backlash from buildings. Building isn't the church. No, it's not. It's the people. We can meet in the parking lot, but we have to meet to be the ecclesia. Right? Whether it's under a tree, by a river, or wherever it's at, in a boat, it doesn't matter. But it's still a gathering of people. And it always has, always will be. Amen? So we have that. 100 times in the Old Testament, you have the church of God. And then there's a little more than 100 times in the New Testament. So around 200 times, you have ecclesia in the Greek version of the Bible, which is pretty interesting. I don't think I can go into all that. I think I just did some of it. We will. Let's go ahead. Yeah. Let's go to the next one. So the Greek word ecclesia, you have these in your notes, was first of all the description of any occasional gathering of people. It's used in this sense in Acts 19:32. But in political life in the Greek Free States, the word denoted a regular legislative assembly called out by a herald from the populace. Here's something that's interesting too. Because the church is gathered by a calling out. So when you look at the legal term of ecclesia in Greek, it works well for the church. And that's what we'll look at real quick. And why that they use that term. I will say this too, I didn't put it in my notes or our notes. There's a lot of other words for assembly in Greek that they could have used. Just like in the Old Testament, there's a lot of other words. The word we see, congregation of the Lord or assembly, those are all the same word. It's just however you translate it. But in Greek, just like love, there's multiple words for love. Well, they have multiple words for assembly. They don't use them. They use the word ecclesia. There's a reason, because it has the legislative, legal gathering powers. And I'm going to break that down real fast. Something interesting too. There's two places in the New Testament where we get our English word church from. I don't know if I've said this before. We don't get our word church from ecclesia. We get our word church is a Scottish word kirk. K-I-R-K. It translates into English church. But the word kirk comes, I'm trying to remember the Greek word. It's like kirk. And I think it is, I don't remember, but it's like kirk. I don't have my Greek memory going so well. I had it this morning. Anyhow, but it only comes twice in the New Testament. And how many can guess where they come from? In Paul's writing and John's writing. In Corinthians, when he says the Lord's table, the Lord's supper, he goes into that word. In John, when I was on the Lord's day. The book of John, chapter 1. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. Instead of the church of God, the ecclesia of God, it was the day that belonged to the Lord. Something very interesting with this is what's powerful. So in communion, as you gather yourselves together on the Lord's day, Paul says, he uses this word, kirk, right? Kukurion, that's what it is. I knew I would get it. Kukurion is where they translated in English or Scottish, it became kirk, and then in English became church. So that's where we get the word church. We don't. How many ever thought we always get it from ecclesia? Yeah, that's the Latin word for assembly. We don't get our word church from ecclesia, but that's the word that's used all the time. You get it from these two places. It's called Kukurion of the Lord. Ecclesia is the gathering of God. But the Kukurion of the Lord belongs to Jesus. Here's something interesting about that. This is just another side note, which I think is pretty fascinating. It denotes a time I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, or when you gather together and you take communion on the Lord's day. There's an etch in time when we gather as a people. So the ecclesia of God is this great gathering of people. Transcends times and space, age and race, economic status. It's global, right? But whenever that gathering happens, and every time that gathering happens, it is the Kukurion of the Lord. It belongs to the Lord. It's the Lord's day. And that day is marked down forever as a holy moment in time. We leave and forget. We do. How many services have you been? Do you remember every service? The Lord remembers every gathering of His people that has ever happened. He remembers every detail of the service. Think about that with me just for a moment. It belongs to the Lord. It's the Lord's day. It's the Lord's gathering. So in those two places, when they gathered for communion, why? They had to check themselves and to test themselves in the faith as they're partaking of this table. And then in Revelation, John says, I was in the Spirit of the Lord's day, and I see those, that's the term where we get the word church in English from. Isn't that amazing? In those two places. So therefore, when the church gathers, yes, we are the assembly of Jehovah. We are the church of God. But when we gather, we belong to the Lord at this specific day. I was in the Spirit of the Lord's day. So even as we gather to study the Word, and we can come from different church assemblies of God, it doesn't matter. This is a Kukurion of the Lord. You see what I'm saying? And this moment is etched in time. Boom. And God looks at this expanse of time and sees every gathering of His holy people. All the way to Israel, around the mountain, flame and